since we are still celebrating this year's 40th anniversary of Radha Gopinath's move from Amsterdam to Radhadesh in 1980. Although there's not much to celebrate, but we still want to remember Gopinath's. For him it's a big celebration that finally he arrived in his royal abode, like the castle. And actually this pastime started in 1976 when Srila Prabhupada was in New Mayapur, and at one point after the initiations and installation of Krishna and Balaram, we were all seated in the grass on the lawn in front of the castle, of the New Mayapur castle. And Srila Prabhupada, we were all taking prasadam, it was really sumptuous, and it was the verse Chatur Vidasri Bhagavat Prasadam, it came to life. There was food that was licked and chewed and sucked and drunk, and we were all really relishing this wonderful prasadam. And then one of the devotees looked up at the castle and saw Srila Prabhupada from his window watching us, and he had a big smile on his face. We all paid obeisance. He said, "Prabhupada's looking." We paid obeisances. It was like hundreds of devotees sitting there in lines taking prasadam. And so we paid obeisances and we put our hands up, "Jai Prabhupada." And then Srila Prabhupada, he actually himself, he put his arms way up like this and gave us a big smile. And then when he turned around and Bhagavan was in the room and other devotees were in the room, I heard that later, that Prabhupada said, "So you get me four castles like this, and then all the devotees, they can come and take prasadam and be happy and be in Krishna consciousness." So actually it started like this, because then the instruction of the spiritual master empowers the disciple to fulfill this desire. And soon after, Radhadesh was found. In Italy we found a castle, in Spain. So altogether there was 4 castles. And then, so it was in 79 that the castle was found. The devotees, they cleaned up a bunch. And then 80, I think it was December 80. January 1st. We had a big festival here before the deities came. We had a New Year festival, prasadam, and big kirtan. In those days, devotees, they were all over the place, so all Benelux devotees, they came together, and we had big kirtan trying to reach the ceiling, which was at that time lower than now. They had made lower ceilings. And then soon after, Radha Gopinath and Jagannath Balaram Subhadra, Chota Radha Gopinath, Lalita Vishaka, and Sri Sri Radha, they came. And I don't want to mention any dates in this situation because there's many memories different. It's like from 80 till 86, so many things happened, and every single period was feels like a lifetime. And I cannot imagine it was only 1 year, only 1 month, or only 3 months. It's so many things happened. So I think we just take it as a period. And Gopinath came in 1980 here to Radhadesh. They had set up the altars from Amsterdam. We used to call them the tulip altars. I don't know why, maybe because we were in Amsterdam, because they were meant to be lotus buds. And the lotus buds, but they looked, because the lotus buds were a little bit open, so some devotees said, "Oh, they look like tulips," which was perfectly okay for Amsterdam. Then they came, they put the altars in a room, what we call it now, 1A, because there was a little arch in on 1/3 of the room, and then so behind the arch there was the altar, and the rest of the room was a temple room, which was quite small. And then behind there was a few steps up, and which is now the bathroom. That was the place where we washed the dishes. I think it was also only place that there was water available. There was 1 bathroom in the whole castle, and that was at the end of the corridor. where now the GBC room is and offices. And then there was one, I think they must have, either they organized it, but for the rest there was no water, no bathrooms, no toilets, nowhere. So, and so those deities were put there. And again, we had the same situation as Amsterdam. The reason why we had to leave Amsterdam is because the building was dilapidating. We couldn't dance because the floor was moving. We couldn't sing because the neighbors would get disturbed. Police would come. Now we came to Radhadesh, and again we couldn't dance because the altar was quite heavy. So they probably reinforced a little bit. And then the rest of the room was quite not strong enough for all the devotees. Because there's lots of devotees in those days. You had to be really early to be able to go to Mangalarti, because otherwise you wouldn't fit in. Especially the girls, they had to have the side next to the window. You had to kind of squeeze in, and you'd be lucky if you get to be in Mangalarti. There's lots of devotees all the time. That was basically, they were going out on Sankirtan from Radhadesh. And especially in the weekends, other Sankirtan centers, the devotees would come. There was a few devotees that stayed behind in Amsterdam, but it was a small preaching center, so really all the devotees were living in Radhadesh, wherever they could find a place. So then we had the pujari room where we would wash the dishes, and then the room, what is now Prabhupada's museum room, that was still in half. There was a wall in between, and that was the pujari room where we would keep the clothes. So everything was closed. And the sewing room was all the way at the end for a little bit, at the big office behind. That's now the public relation office, right? Where you are. So then, at that time, I think Navaswati was the head pujari. It didn't mean anything much, because it just meant that you are taking care, you are taking responsibility for the program going on, the artics going on, the deities being dressed. And we always had a male authority above us, because the deities were taken care of by the mothers, because they had children, so they couldn't go out on Sankirtan. And then we could take care of the deities, which was very nice. It was very familiar, and we would take care of the deities the best we could. And the children, they just hang around and help us or disturb us, whatever happened. And then we also started little Gurukul, actually, but that was more helpful. That was then downstairs, where now the prasadam room is. At that time, there was one situation, I could say, that Nabaswati, she was head pujari, and her husband was a temple president. So, but she was quite sickly. She would get sick quite regularly. And in the beginning, we would live in the rooms in that same hall, in the same corridor. We would have rooms, each one room, or sometimes Nabaswati and me together with the children. But then they decided that actually grihastas, they should live outside, which there was no outside, there's only villages. But we found a house that we rented for the temple president and his wife and his son, and then me and Rupa Manjari, my daughter. That was in Grandhamn. It was 2 hours walk. 2 hours walk in Grandhamn. We used to call it Madan Mohan. That was the house called Madan Mohan. That was the first Grihastha house we could find as close as possible. So then either if we missed the morning ride, Vespamuta Sangha went to the temple, and we couldn't miss it. We had to get up early and we couldn't miss, otherwise you had to walk 2 hours through the fields and backwards also. So basically you would just live in the temple. And then in the evening late if we could find, because there was no cars also. So if we could find a ride, then we go back home. But in Amsterdam it was the same thing. We just, everybody, all grihastas, it didn't matter. You all lived in the temple and you went to sleep in the grihastha house. So at that time, when at one point Navasati, she had to go to India to have treatment. She was going to go to India for a few months. So was that the situation? No, first Kula Devi came. He was a brahmachari, and he came from South America. And he just came and stayed for a bit. Bhagavan was, his zone was quite open, so he stayed for a bit, and he always liked to address the deities. In those days, everybody was Brahmana. It's not like now. Now you have to, oh, you come, oh, you're initiated. Yeah, no, but not first, not second, whatever. Everybody in those days, there were Brahmanas. Very quickly, especially in Prabhupada's disciples, we were all Brahmanas in the same year usually. First initiation, and half a year later, or a little later, second. So everybody could dress the deities. Everybody wanted to dress the deities. Everybody was very enthusiastic. It was really a favor to be able to dress. So this devotee Kula Devi came, and he was a pujari for a little bit, and then he thought, well, because I was dressing Radha Gopinath usually, Navaswati, because she was regularly sick, she would either not be there, or so I dressed Radha Gopinath, and he would be dressing Chota. And he found that because he was a male and a brahmachari, he should be able to dress Radha Gopinath. So he was pushing a little bit, and yes, so he started dressing Radha Gopinath, which for me it was perfect because I was supposed to be doing Gurukul, and Gurukul was downstairs. And so while I would be dressing the deities, I would have to run downstairs regularly to go check what the kids were doing. I would give them a picture. They could make pictures and different pictures, and then every round, and they were not very long rounds, but every round they would meditate on one picture, and there was a few, like 8 pictures or something. But you know, when there has no one to take care of, not watch them, that wouldn't always be a very peaceful situation. So I was happy I could just do Gurukul, and so he became the head pujari, because he drank, you know, how he became the head pujari for a little bit, and we had Medani there, Rasa Manjari, who else was there at the time? Lokamata. So Navaswati should come, and we would dress the deities, then do the greeting of the deities, Guru Puja, and everyone was there, Srimad Bhagavatam class. And so one point, oh yeah, and Harda, she was really good. She was always also making the garlands, making the vases for the altar, and cooking, like to cook for the deities. So there's a lot of things to do for Radha Gopinath. And she was also really good at collecting for the deities. So she was collecting, and Kula Dev, he was ready to go to India and do the shopping for in India, because that was one of the first things they started doing in India, shopping. But then what happened? Somehow he got distracted there and misspent the money. So we got a few things back from India, a few things that weren't very useful, and Kula Dev didn't come back. He stayed in India. But he found another brahmachari in India, a friend of his, who's called Satya Shrestha. And Satya Shrestha was one of the devotees, the first devotees who had Shalagram Shilas. He had gone to Nepal, and he had acquired Shalagram Shilas, and he was worshipping them. But in those days we were not worshipping Shalagram Shilas on the altar. There was no permission from Srila Prabhupada. So Kula Dev had told him, he said, you go to Radhadesh, and there they will allow you to worship, to put your Shilas on the altar and worship them on the altar. So he came with the hopes that this would, but of course there was no permission. Also in Radhadesh there was no permission to put the Shalagram Shilas, personal Shilas, on the altar. There was no Shilas in those days. But anyway, he was there, and he was so much into deity worship. It was so nice. He was always walk around full prayers, always prayers. So he started dressing Chota Radha Gopinath. And then one point, so that time, Navaswati, she had to go to India for treatment. So he heard this through the grapevine, that Namaswati was gone. So I was coming up the stairs for some reason during the day, and he came down the big stairs. And he said, oh, so Namaswati is going, I heard, and so who's going to be the head pujari now? And I said, well, I don't know, I guess it's going to be me. Like very nonchalant, like, okay, then, you know, we take turns, so it's probably going to be me then. So he huffed and puffed down the stairs, and he was so upset. He went to the temple president, he said, I cannot stay here any longer. This deity worship is not serious. So he went up to the Brahmachari ashram, packed his suitcase, and it was a very cute little suitcase, like the old carton board suitcases. He packed his suitcase and he walked down the road. And here, to go to the train station, is a long walk. So then, Vimukta Sangha, he was very concerned because he was very valuable pujari, but finally we got a serious pujari on the altar. And so he went with the Mercedes behind him and caught him halfway to the train station. And he said, well, if you stay, then we'll make you the head pujari, and then you can take care of the deities. So he accepted. And he was very happy about it. And he promised, actually the first thing he did is clean the pujari room. Clean the little pujari room, the washroom, and Gopinath's wigs, the hair of the deities. It was washed. And actually I have to admit that we never thought of doing this. all those years actually. We didn't think of washing the hair. So that's first things he was doing, washing the hair of the deities. And then he promised, he said, within 3 years I want to make Gopinath, Radha Gopinath, famous all over ISKCON in the whole world. And actually he managed, because the deity worship was uplifted like anything, the standard was uplifted. Little by little the Archana Padati came out, and he was training us to learn how to bathe. So at that time only Chota Radha Gopinath was bathed according to the Archana Padati standard, and the other deities we did the normal puja, the simple puja like we used to do before. And then we used to have regular meetings, pujari meetings, where we would all learn the prayers, we should all learn how to do the puja for Chota Radha Gopinath with all the mantras to go with it. We would learn prayers, we'd all sit together in the morning before starting to bless the deities. We would all say the prayers together, the Mangala, Chandrika, and all the different prayers that we learned according to the Archana Padati, the Buddhi Sutta, different prayers. And so this was very nice. We really became like a pujari crew. But that made it a little difficult that other pujaris, they wouldn't be able to come and dress. And they had to, actually in those days, if you wanted to dress the deities, you first had to make either 1,000 ghee wigs or three breakfast offerings, cook 3 breakfast offerings, or you had to do some penance before you were allowed to come on the altar. So that was also his way. He was doing many fire yagyas, and every fire yagya he would make fire with mantra. He just made the fire by mantra, which was very nice also. And also one of the rules, for example, me and Midani would be dressing the deities usually, the other deities, and we would like to talk. And he would come in, and he wouldn't allow us. After some time, it took 3-4 days, I think, that he said, okay, from now on, this is it, no talking before dressing the deities. So in Pujari room, we were not allowed to talk, only after we could talk. But because it's true, we'd be a little late on the altar, or we didn't, because we were, you know, it was used to be our children, basically, the deities. We just take care of them like we used to take care of our children. But so he brought up the standard really nicely, and then he started making pictures and pictures and pictures and sending them all over the world. And in that time, in many temples, they started to get pictures of Radha Gopinatha. So meanwhile, while the deities were in 1A, that was of course a very temporary situation, And I just don't remember how temporary it was, because many things happened during that time. And it was always in 1A. And then, but meanwhile they were preparing the temple room. And it was a big construction job, because they had to take one wall away that was a supporting wall. And then Krishna, I forget his name now, one devotee who was an engineer from Holland. He knew how to do this, so they had to put a big metal beam up in the ceiling, and that is now where the first decoration is. It separates the altar from the temple room. So they did that, and actually in that time, even the tower, they developed a crack. It actually came down a little bit, and you can, I think it's even visible in that main room, your public relation room. You could see the crack there. Okay. So the castle came down a little bit. It was a bit quite a big construction. So then they started building the altar there. And it was not the original, not the final altar that we have now. It was a basic marble steps and a platform for the deities to it. It was all quite square and straight. And then on top of that they built like a kind of a shingasan, a flat wooden structure that looked a little bit, was cut out. There must be pictures that you could show that show this altar, and then behind it we would have, I remember Sadhu Shrestha, he got us to make a special archway with flowers that were silk flowers, so they would stay fresh all the time. And then Aharda usually made vases to go in between, and we didn't really have backdrops in those days, just a kind of a curtain behind. And that was and then we would decorate when there was festivals. We decorate with green, and so that was the first altar. And I'm not sure that in the beginning the pujari room was still upstairs. So we would carry the plates or whatever, the Mangalati sweet plates, whatever was prepared upstairs. We would bring it to the temple room. The clothes were still upstairs. Then at one point they prepared the pujari rooms downstairs. And it was in that time like a really opulent pujari room. And they were making the stairs to go down to the pujari room, so we didn't have to walk through the temple room anymore. And I remember also Sadhu Shrestha, he was instrumental in moving the whole kitchen wall up, because the kitchen was really huge. It was a restaurant before we moved in. Even when we came in, the last remnants of the restaurant were still in the fridges, the old fridges. When they opened it, it was smelling really hellish. So they got rid of that fridge, we couldn't really keep it. So actually, the kitchen was huge. There was these two big, huge pressure cookers, like huge. A person, 5 people could sit in it. Huge too, and that's where we would keep the warm water for the washing the clothes or taking a shower. But if you wanted to take a warm shower, you had to go down, get your bucket and bring some warm water upstairs. So he wanted the pujari room to be bigger, and that was that was not necessary. According to the managers, we didn't need to have a bigger pujari room. And the same thing happened with the altar. That they wanted to make the altar a little smaller, or in a certain size, that the temple room would be bigger. But Sadhu Shrestha said, well, if you make the altar that small, we cannot walk in front, we cannot sit in front to do the puja for Chota. So he wanted 60 centimeters more. And they said, no, it's not possible. He said, okay. He went up to the brahmachari ashram, got his suitcase ready, and he would run away. So they had to go after him and bring him back and say, okay, you will have your 60 centimeters of altar. Which we are so grateful, because it's really true, we would not be able to do puja properly without that 60 centimeters that you need to walk and to sit, to do the puja for Chota. Then the same thing happened with the pujari rooms, because there's the big wall, the main wall, and then it was the kitchen. But that wall is also really thick. It's the same, I don't know if it's the same wall, but anyway, it's a really thick wall. So he wanted them to move the kitchen wall up and break open this arch that we have now, the doorway. And so we could have bigger cupboards, and the brown cupboards also. So every time he would want something, he wouldn't get it. He would say, okay, then I'm leaving. And this way he got whatever he wanted. The brown cupboards, they were made, custom made by a carpenter who lives in the next village, Palange. It was a big thing to get those big drawers in it and everything. He insisted, and it was very expensive, but if he wouldn't get it, he would leave. So that was it. And at that time, Yadurani, she came. She joined. She was very expert in keeping the pujari room clean, so that we would have our meetings there. And he was very strict brahmachari. He would never be alone with the Matajis, because basically all the other pujaris were Matajis. There was a few other, Parma Siddhi, Bhakta, another, he was also pujari. A few pujaris, nice brahmacharis also. And we had a team, we had a really nice team. I think I would like to stop here, just to recuperate, and then try to start another one with more memories. At this time, I was thinking it might be nice, and some of the devotees still remember this period, because there's many devotees who are there, and it might be nice to have your input somewhere, and we can maybe communicate, see what we remember, because even it's nice to remember. If we all together remember little things, then it will become a more fuller picture. So maybe we can finish here and then get some feedback from the devotees that remember that time also.